All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA. Thanks for tuning into the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? So, what I want to talk about today is basically saying money exposes you exactly for who you are. At least I think a lot of times. So, I can relate to this. And why I wanted to bring this kind of into a podcast is kind of what I went through in my past and throughout my life regarding money. And I am down with money. Don't think I'm not down with it. God bless people that want to make tons of money, or whatever you want to do with money if you think about money. I've never really truly been consistent with money, saving, making, whatever you want to say. My father always even says he's not a money guy, even though at certain times in his life, he's made a lot of money over the years, and he's lost a lot of money, I think, like a lot of people. And my mother's more, I think, on the likes money, but really wants to help people and more kind of caught up with, being a Christian. She values more, or being a Catholic, I should say, more than money. And she values herself, I think, a lot more than anything else, which I respect her immensely for that. She's not going to get into a situation. You're never going to buy her, or she's never going to be with someone for money. She'll never stick with anyone for money or any of those type of things. She is exactly who she is, which is, she values herself, which is an incredible trait in itself. So I was around, my mother was a very strong, diehard Catholic, and my father was a nightclub owner. And I have realized myself, I am not obsessed with money or caught up with that. I am more caught up in the adventure. It's the journey for me. It's not even about the money. That's why I work the way I work. I think in the lifestyle that I lead, it's about, I always said a lot of times, the way you pay me is through my lifestyle. If I have the lifestyle I want, then I'm fine. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. It could be a lot of money. It doesn't have to be. But I've seen over the years where a lot of people obviously change when they make money. For the better. I'd say a lot of times for the worse. And I've been around a lot of people in my life. And I'm talking a lot of different style people, not only from nightclubs, businesses, just in construction, in many different areas, from athletes, just tons of different people in tons of different, it could be drug dealers, it could be tons of things, it could be businessmen, commercial real estate, residential real estate, mortgage, all these different types of things. And I've been around a lot of people who are obsessed with making a lot of money, and God bless them. But the one thing I realized and this happened to me, is the more money I made, I don't necessarily think the better the person I became. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And I think a lot of people who haven't made a lot of money don't understand what they may or may not turn into. Because I think a lot of times, when I was younger, I didn't have a lot of money. My parents were divorced. My father owned a nightclub. And when I was with my father, we lived kind of a more lavish lifestyle, I guess you could say, because he owned a nightclub, restaurant, and then we'd go places. I'd spend one day a week with him, and we would go out for steak, lobster, and, we'd go see comedians. We'd go to the movies. We would go see bands. We would do things like that. I'd go to the Playboy Club, whatever, with my father. He would take me to do all these different types of things, which was wonderful. But then with my mother, it was really hard on her. She was a divorced parent, single parent. So I always wanted to truly make money. I literally wanted to quit junior high. And I think my mother sensed that. I was having a lot of problems because I just kind of thought school was bullshitty. It just wasn't for me. And I kind of was bopping between seeing what my father's lifestyle was, and I could just go work with him and make money, or I wanted to become a professional athlete, but I would have given up at that time and point, giving up an athlete for just making money. I just wanted to start making money at a very young age. And a lot of my uncles on one side were involved with gambling, going to the track and betting and all those things, and they had a lot of, they lived kind of, more of an Italian, I guess you could say, mob lifestyle that I really gravitated towards. And then on the other side of my family, my dad's family, were all businessmen. upper middle class condos. I used to call them the Italian Kennedys. So between both of them, I wasn't either one of them. I was an only child, which I have nothing against. But on both sides of my family, I kind of liked my uncles. I guess you could say I really looked up to all my uncles and my father and my mother too. But I was really gravitating towards my great uncles, I should say, and then my father's brother-in-laws and his brothers. Like I said, they had boats, they had Cadillacs, they traveled all over the world. So when I would go with them on trips, because a lot of times my mother would allow me to go spend a lot of time with my uncles and aunts on both sides of the family, because they all had very big families, Italian Catholic families. So it was like I would automatically be thrown in the mix, and I would always go to Florida with them, go on trips, and we had a summer home that we'd all go to in the summers. So my mother would allow me to go with them, even though she was divorced, which thank God she allowed me to do that. And it was just a wonderful life. But then when it was me and my mom, it was hard. But when I wanted to quit school literally in junior high. So my mother sent me to a private Catholic school, which she thinks saved my life, whatever the case may be. So I mainly concentrated on sports. But I remember even coming to help my father, I would spend the summers in Florida. And not that I was making any money there, but I would come there, and then it was cool. He had a Cadillac convertible. We'd go to South Beach. We'd go to water parks. It was in Orlando, Florida. We'd go to Disney. We'd go to hotels, jacuzzi, and there was a lot of show bands back then, kind of in Orlando. They don't do that anymore, obviously, DJs. And I mean, there's some bands, but it was kind of almost like a Disney. It was just different. It was, I don't want to say it was Vegas for kids, kind of, but it was different. It was just a different time in the 80s with nightclubs and bands and things in that nature. And I always had a fake ID, so I was able to go anywhere I wanted at a very young age. And I just wanted money. I was kind of sick of being broke. And then I was working my senior year in high school, or junior and senior year. I was making some money valet parking. Then I worked for the city, which was nice. And then my dad came in for a birthday party when I was 18. And all my friends were going to college. And I was honestly contemplating going to California or Florida. I knew I just couldn't stand the weather in Chicago. I just didn't know necessarily what I was going to do. But I already knew I was spending summers in Florida with my dad, and he was in the vending business. We were supposed to go to South Florida and open a huge nightclub, but my father stopped in Orlando because my stepmother's sister was there, so she wanted to stay. So we started a small vending business, which ended up being much bigger later in life. But I was kind of on the fence because Orlando, really, there was not much to do. I didn't know anybody there, and I really was groomed to be kind of, I thought, like a nightclub runner. And now all of a sudden my father's going in all these kind of bars that were like all these southern, I don't want to call them rednecks because a lot of my friends are rednecks, but it's like we were Yankees and they'd call us Yankees, and we'd goof around and call them rednecks. But, a lot of Floridians and stuff who now I've been there for the majority of my life. Those are some of my closest friends. But at that point in time, you think you're a city slicker from Chicago and you're going in and out of all these bars, playing country music, all that. So I wasn't necessarily jiving with that. It also wasn't like, not that I go to the beach all the time, but Orlando didn't have a beach. So my father came and said, listen, I'll put a downstroke on the car you want, and I think I'm going to give you all the Hooters because we're going to close that account. You could start off kicking ass that way. That never came to be, but to make a long story short, I never really, even though I ended up moving to Florida, Orlando with my father, I just never really felt like at that point in time I fit in. But I was making money. At the beginning, but as time went on, I started to make more and more money, which was good. And then I learned how to make money legally and illegally independent. And I also would travel and gamble. So I did my own thing. But I realized I started to become obsessed with making money or having money. And it wasn't, let me get some water here, it wasn't always a good thing, what I was kind of doing and the way I was behaving. It's kind of funny when you start making money because you want to start helping people, I think, a lot of times, right? And you will do that. You will help people, which takes the edge off you and says, that's good that I can help this person, that person, and I'm always... But at the same time, I think, I can't speak for everyone, but at the other time, I had no problem kind of making money in ways, again, legally or illegally, but not giving a shit and just Like I'd go to bed thinking about making money, waking up, all those things, was obsessed with making money. And even before I got married, when I was hanging out at a lot of strip clubs, let's say nightclubs, all these things that I remember when I was younger, and my father owned a club, and I even had a podcast on this. I'd look at all these people like, hey, you're all lost souls. You got to party, you got to drink, you got to do all this shit. Like, get a life. And then I found myself kind of doing that, and then spending a lot of money, trying to get a lot of attention, spending it on a lot of women, traveling. And again, I'm not saying that's bad, on clothing, whatever. I respect anyone who spends the money they want, or how they want to spend it. But in my case, I just knew, for one, a lot of that was just insecurity, but it really wasn't me. I just felt, and I'm not going to get into all the crazy shit that I used to do, I just didn't feel like I was a better person when I was making more and more money. I become greedy to make more. I definitely know that. And then it was never enough. And I even remember my ex-wife, because we brought a big new home. I was in my mid-20s in a gated community, and I wanted to have a Lincoln, and then I had to have a Cadillac, and then we ended up having to have a truck for work. I said, all right, bring that in, whatever. But I wanted a lift gate, or we ended up having a lift gate on it. But I also was like, I have to have this furniture, designer leather here, another leather couch here. I need this. And I just kept buying, and same with jewelry, having to buy Rolexes, matching Rolexes, and I had to have diamond rings and more and more. And my ex-wife just says, when did you become so obsessed with possessions? And it kind of struck me like, yeah, when did that happen? And why am I upset? It was like almost, they talk about different, like, what am I looking for? What's the word here? Addictions. And, you hear about shopaholics, or you hear drug addicts, alcoholics, all these different things. But I think there's like an addiction where it's an insecurity addiction, where no matter how much you get, it's never enough. And then I ended up having my first daughter, in which my mindset was, I want to give her everything in the world. I don't care what it is. I mean, even before she was born, I remember my ex-wife was pregnant in Vegas, and I'm buying her like minks and Neiman Marcus, like baby minks. I'm like, doing those type of things. Now my daughter came, we filled her entire closet with a wardrobe, which makes kind of no sense because, everybody, besides buying gifts for her, but I would go into all the top stores and buy all the best outfits. So if she was a size 6 to 9 for a baby, 6 months to 9 months, I'm buying every top designer clothes for her. Then, they even have video footage of that. And then I wouldn't get her a potty, like to learn how to like go to potty on a regular toilet, like a baby toilet. I had to go get her a specialty made leather seat for her. And I just was doing all these crazy things. And then my daughter ended up actually becoming very sick and needed a liver transplant, which made me look at life, obviously, in an entirely different way, even financially, because the majority of my money now was being spent on hospital bills. So my life did a 180. And what was interesting is when you go through something like that, unless you really go through it, you don't understand it. And a lot of people will be like, oh my God, you have a sick child. I can't imagine what you go through. Or this happened. I can't believe what you go through. Listen, we all go through a lot of things. And how we interpret it is our own way of doing that. But when I really looked at it, and what was interesting is I needed at that point in time to make more money to keep up with more medical bills. Now it wasn't for just buying stupid shit, so it kind of flipped, and I ended up having to sell a ton of my shit to keep up with the medical bills. So I'm trying to make money, sell my shit, keep up with that. It was very stressful, and I lost a lot of my possessions. And then I kind of made a comeback later, a little bit, and then I discussed this on my previous podcast. I got so exhausted from the chase, because in between that I wanted to make films, so I was trying to make movies, so I'm trying to raise money for movies, spending money on movies, spending money on healthcare, and all those type of things, and just trying to make money and being still kind of obsessed with trying to keep up with the Joneses a little bit, sending my kids to private schools, again having to get new cars, living in certain communities, which is what I think most people are programmed to do, and nothing against them. I mean, that's wonderful. I am, and when I talk a lot of times, I don't think I'm digging on any of that. I did it. I loved it. And then I almost had, like, after I got a divorce, I can't say everyone thought like, wow, Rich, you're having a breakdown. And it was nothing like that. It was actually me finally seeing clearly. But when people sometimes see that you're changing your identity, or you're so different than you were before, and you kind of want to just be free and just release, at least that's what I call it, just releasing all the things that you are constantly stressing over or constantly upset over. And I realized a lot of those things were self-driven, and they were related to money. And me living outside my means at times, up and down. Me trying to do things that cost a lot of money, that cost a lot of time, and that weren't actually helping me, that were actually like just making me literally crazy. And when they talk about people that have heart attacks and, the stress of money and this and that, I can easily see that. But I went through a period, I don't know if you've heard my previous podcasts, where I released everything. After I got a divorce, I went and lived with my cousin in Carlsbad, California. And all I wanted to worry about was obviously paying child support and getting my daughters everything they wanted. That's something that was number one on my list, and keeping up with my daughter's medical bills. Any problems she had, or either one of them. And I was able to come back and forth frequently, constantly actually. So I lived basically in Florida and California. But I just was exhausted. And I really even gave my car to my mother. So I'd rent a car or not have a car. I remember even in California sometimes, because social media just kind of broke out with Facebook, and I was in LA, and people knew that I used to make films in my past. If I went to California, and I started a job and I was traveling a lot, not necessarily making a lot of money, but people just thought the way I dressed and acted, I was living this extravagant lifestyle, which was actually not the case at all. I was actually living on my cousin's futon for the most part. Or wherever I'd go, I'd spend a lot of time in Chicago, and I'd stay at my aunts and uncles or my mother's. I'd spend time there, and then when I went to Florida, I'd have a hotel. My ex-wife was so cool. I'd stay with my ex-wife sometimes. If she was with her new husband, she would take off. I'd hang with my kids at their house. They were super cool about that. And I would stay at my father's and stepmother's house. And it was, you would think you'd feel embarrassed, right? A lot of people didn't know this, but I would tell them this. I even stayed on my friend's couch for a long time, like 7-8 months in Chicago. He was very, very open to say, Rich, just stay with me. I know, whatever. And I was in Chicago doing some work. I spent the summer working with my friend, one of my closest friends, he owns a law firm downtown with all him, and he shared an office with a bunch of other lawyers, great guys. And he said, Rich, just spend the summer with me and work with me. And it was one of the best summers of my life. And this is, over time. And it wasn't about making money. It was, I had to make money to support my children the best I could, which I always made sure I paid, child support and all that. But I kind of got rid of a lot of stress, I guess you could say, and all these other things that were making me crazy just to figure out who the hell I was. And I realized that a lot of times, like, I'm different people depending on the situation I'm in, especially financially. Like if I'm, now I could look back and go, wow, when you had this much money, you behaved this way. And when you had this much money, you behaved this way. And when you were married and had money, you behaved this way. When you were divorced, you're this way. I don't think a lot of people sit back and even realize that your behavior a lot of times depending on how much money you have, which is understandable, especially I think with men a lot of times, but I can't say I'm not a woman, so maybe women too. I mean, it's across the board. But if you're listening to this podcast, kind of become self-aware of who you are when making money. Now, if I go back to making a ton of money, I just know how I'm going to behave differently and what I plan on doing with it. And it's really more or less about helping others. I realize I don't need all these things to make me happy. If I had a Ferrari, God bless. If I don't care. When I was 25, I needed to have put it to 25, when I was 18, I had to have a Grand National. Then I was 21 with a convertible Mercedes. And then even after that, I had, like I said, I'm 24 25, I have to have a brand new Cadillac, a brand new Lincoln, whatever else I wanted. So it was endless, where now I can, if I want possessions, I want them, don't get me wrong, but it's not who I am as a person. Money is not going to make me be any different, I think, at this point in my life, at least from behavior-wise or being understanding. Now, maybe I'm wrong, because maybe if I came into a ton of money, maybe I would turn into another jerk again, or I may become an egotistical maniac. I just don't see that anymore. But regardless what age you are, if you're younger, middle-aged, older, I do believe that if you have money or you start getting a lot of money, it does truly expose you for who you are deep down inside. And sometimes, hey, I'm not here to dig on anybody. I think what happens with people too, happened with me, is when you don't have a lot of money for long periods of time and then you get it, you want to get nuts. And that's where you see a lot of athletes, for instance, celebrities or all them, they go out and they spend a lot of money. They buy homes that they think they're going to make money forever. And a lot of times that's not the case, as you know, and they lose everything. And that could be for people who even win lotteries. But I'm here to tell you, just my mother used to say this too, save the money. I'm telling you, life sometimes can be very long and you never know what's going to happen. If I had even 1 or 2 years of the money that I used to spend freely just in restaurants and other things, I would probably be close to, probably just in a couple of years, like be set for retirement. That's the kind of money I used to kind of go through now that I look back at it. And when I look back at it, you think it's gonna go on forever. And for some people it does, but a majority it doesn't. Because I really believe, for the most part, and I've been around thousands of people, a lot of people make a lot of good money at certain times in their life, and then they take on a lot more expenses, or then they start having more kids or grandkids or whatever the case may be. So they end up spending a lot of money even when they're making a lot of money. But then when that money, they're not making that type of money, because a lot of times what happens is they become outdated. So whatever business they're in, not everyone, or whatever they've started, they may catch a great hot trend. It could be for 5 years, a decade, or even, 20 years. But things do change. And unless you invest your money properly, it doesn't keep growing the way it always does. And plus, you just get older. And a lot of times, like I just said, the older you get, the more you spend sometimes, just because you have more responsibilities. And you take on more because originally you were making more money. But just be aware of that. I just thought I would do a podcast on that. What I went through, there's tons of different things. But young people especially, try to save your money and try to do the right thing. And I know you think you're going to live forever. You always think you're going to make more money every year. You always think things are going to go your way. Or you always think, oh, wait, I'm going to invest here. Or don't worry, I'm going to do this or that. And that's going to happen. It's just going to be more money, more money, more money. The truth is, probably it's not the case at all. You're going to have, and I describe it all the time, good days, good weeks, bad weeks, good months, bad months, good years, bad years. And don't think that at any moment something can't happen to you or a family member, which could include, your parents, your kids, your brothers, your sisters, who knows, especially you, where something happens medically where it costs a lot of money, or you may become disabled, or you may become ill. So that is really something to really consider, and I don't think a lot of people do consider that. I'm all about staying healthy, but you got to understand a lot of times, and this could be even if you're married, if something happens to your husband or your wife, you may need that extra money. It's going to go a long way. So, anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you get a chance, you might want to check out my YouTube channel. I've been doing a lot of different traveling lately, just in the last couple weeks. I've hit New York, Boston, Canada a couple times. I hit San Fran. I'm going to be hitting San Diego and Vegas soon. I'm in Alabama, actually, at the time doing this podcast. And where was I yesterday? I was in Destin. So, yeah, and that's what made me think about sometimes with money, because I was working and then I turned around and out of nowhere, actually I saw it in New York, first in Manhattan, somebody was like screaming in a Lamborghini. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I used to love those cars. My dad loves them too. Somebody actually recently offered my dad to swipe his car. Two guys offered him to swipe his car. He has a 1980 Golden Spirit Zimmer for a Lamborghini. Two guys wanted to maybe swap. But then when I was in Destin, I was outside Destin at Grayton Beach, which is near Santa Rosa Beach, which is a beautiful area. And it was raining really bad. And it was just like I was by the beach area. I had to do some work there, and then I worked out, and then two dudes pulled up with like two Lambos. And I looked at them and I said, holy shit, I remember thinking, man, I got to buy one of those years ago. And I'm thinking, wow, that's not even on my radar anymore. It's like I just look at sports cars as an expense. And I know even people that have expensive sports cars, and I've had some expensive sports cars, it's like just constant maintenance and a high insurance. And if something happens to it, and the stress of like wherever you go with it, like is somebody going to ding it if you got to valet park it, or all those type of things. I'm thinking, wow, I'd like to have I'd like to have one for like a few days, and I know the deal, and then kind of get rid of it. It's almost like a boat. I think sometimes sports cars is a lot cooler to, kind of great to enjoy, like as a passenger, or even rent or have some fun with it, but not great to own. At least that's how I look at it. But maybe in the future I would think differently, but that's just my perspective. But I said, you know what, I got to do a podcast on what I went through regarding money and how it changed me up and down. And a lot of times too, you have to realize, which I'll throw in, you making money too, if you ever make money, it's going to change the way people perceive you, obviously, but a lot of times the way people act towards you, which most likely you'll know this, you've seen this probably a million times in movies or everything else, where everybody's kind of kissing your ass or trying to sponge off you. And in my case, I don't believe I had that. I genuinely had a lot of good friends and family members. I didn't go through that. I think because either they were too afraid because they either thought it was shady, or because of the way I made money, they were more or less distant from me. So I wasn't like a businessman that started a business and everybody wanted to come and work for me. So I don't know it from that perspective, but I do know I have, a lot of wealthy friends, family members, and even colleagues that do really well. And you could tell sometimes the way people sometimes treat them is kind of phony. And I think they're smart enough to realize that. But you got to understand, if you do make a lot of money, people are going to treat you differently. They're going to probably treat you better, but a lot of the times it's not as genuine as maybe you'd like. So just keep an eye on that. All right, if you want, you can check I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So I'm going to wrap it up. Take care, and if you're traveling, safe travels.